15th. Had a long conversation with Sir Hudson Lowe relative to the affairs of Longwood and to Napoleon's health. His Excellency said that he supposed it was Count Bertrand who had informed countless causes that he, Sir Hudson, would send him off the island if he persisted in writing any more injurious reflections upon the manner that General Bonaparte was treated. That he would hold him, Bertrand, answerable for the consequences. He also observed that as to the restrictions which had been so much complained of, there was in reality but little difference. That with respect to the prohibition to speak, which General Bonaparte complained of, it was not an order to him not to speak, but merely a request. He also added that Les Causes had attempted to send a secret accusation against him, which was like stabbing a man in the back, and that they must be conscious they were telling lies, or they would not be afraid to send them to England through him, as he had offered to forward them. In his conversation with Bertrand, he merely had observed that, according to his instructions, he ought to have sent Les Causes off the island, in consequence to the letters he had written. His instructions, he said, were of such a nature that it was impossible to draw a line between some which directed that General Bonaparte should be treated with great indulgence, and others prescribing regulations and restrictions impossible to be reconciled with the first. That he had in consequence written for further explanations, and had recommended the lessening of the existing restrictions. The 16th. Saw Napoleon, to whom I repeated what the governor had desired. Napoleon replied, he sent back and refused to forward a letter of complaints sent to him by Montholon. He told Bertrand that he would receive no letters in which I was not styled as his government wished, and he sent up by his chef d'état-major a paper menacing with transportation from the island all those who should make reflections upon him or his government, independent of his having given Bertrand clearly to understand that if Les Causes continued his complaints, he would send him from St. Helena. In orders like this, there must be always some apparent contradiction and great discretionary powers, but he interprets everything badly, and where there is a possibility of putting a bad construction upon any part which would as well admit of a favorable one, he's sure to choose the former. Un uomo che ha la malizia ma non l'anima, a man who has malice but no genius. Perhaps he sees that he has gone too far and now wants to saddle the odium of his proceedings upon his government. The 18th went along with Mr. Baxter to visit Count Les Causes and son. The Count informed me that the governor had given him permission to return to Longwood under certain conditions, but that he had not entirely decided what he would do. Young Les Causes said that his father feared he should be looked upon in a slighting manner at Longwood if he returned in consequence of the disgraceful manner in which he had been arrested and dragged away by the governor's police. Informed Napoleon on my return that the governor had offered to allow Les Causes to return to Longwood. After some discussion on the subject, he observed that he would give no advice to Les Causes about it. If he came back, he would receive him with pleasure. If he went away, he would hear of it with pleasure, but that in the latter case, he should wish to see him once more before he left the island. He added that since the arrest of Les Causes, he had ordered all his generals to go away, that he should be more independent without them, as then he should not labor under the fear of their suffering ill treatment by the governor, in order thereby to revenge himself upon him. I, continued he, am not afraid that they will send me off the island. Saw Sir Hudson Lowe, who said that, with the exception of certain necessary restrictions, he had orders from the government to treat General Bonaparte with all possible indulgence, which he thought he had done. That if some restrictions had been imposed, it was his own fault, and that of Les Causes, that he had been very mild. This he ordered me to communicate. Shortly afterwards, he said that if Count Bertrand had shown his Sir Hudson's restrictions to Sir Thomas Strange, he, the governor, would have been authorized to send him off the island. Nearly in the same breath, he asked if I thought that the interference of Sir George Bingham as an intermediator would be of any service. I replied that probably it might, but as Sir George Bingham did not speak French with sufficient fluency to enter into long discussions or reasonings, I was of opinion that Admiral Sir Pulteney Malcolm would be a much better intermediator. Told Napoleon what Sir Hudson Lowe had directed. Doctor, replied he, when this man has the audacity to tell you, who know everything that has been done, that he treats me with indulgence, I need not suggest to you what he writes to his government. He informed me that last night he had suffered another attack similar to that of the 13th, but more violent. At least, said he, frightened threw some eau de cologne in my face, mistaking it for water. This getting into my eyes gave me intolerable pain and certainly brought me to myself. Told him what Sir Hudson Lowe had said relative to the intermediation of Sir George Bingham. He replied, perhaps it might be of some service, but all he has to do is que es que de suo rolo di carcelier e que si metta nel ruolo di galantuomo. If any person were to undertake the office of intermediator, the most fit would be the admiral, both because he is independent of Sir Hudson Lowe and because he is a man with whom I can reason and argue. But, continued he, questo governatore è un uomo senza fede. This governor is a man without faith. When your ministry is insincere, wants to shuffle, or has nothing good to execute, a polisson blackguard like Drake or Hudson Lowe is sent out as ambassador or governor when it is the contrary and it wishes to conciliate or treat such a man as Lord Cornwallis is employed. Cornwallis here would be of more avail than all the restrictions that could be imagined. He then observed that he thought it would be better for Las Casas to return back to Longwood than either to remain in the island separated from them or sent to the Cape, and that I might report that I had heard him say so. The 21st, a letter received from Major Gorricaire stating that the governor would permit Archambault to see his brother on the following day, who with Santini and Rousseau had arrived in the Orontes frigate from the Cape. The 22nd, Archambault allowed to see his brother in the presence of one of the governor's agent, but not permitted either to see or converse with any of the others. The 23rd, Sir Hudson Lowe at Longwood informed him what Napoleon had said about Las Casas. He told me that Las Casas wanted to make terms previous to returning to Longwood and desired me to go to Hut's Gate and to tell him what General Bonaparte had said, but not to hold any other communication with him. I mentioned this to His Excellency, the fit of syncope with which Napoleon had been attacked. It would be lucky, replied Sir Hudson Lowe, if he went off some of those nights in a fit of the kind. I observed that I thought it very probable that he would be attacked with a fit of apoplexy, which would finish him, and that continuing to lead his present mode of life, it was impossible he could remain in health. Sir Hudson asked what could induce him to take exercise. I replied to moderate the restrictions and to remove some of which he complained of as such. Sir Hudson Lowe made some observations about the danger of allowing a man to get loose who had done so much mischief already, and desired me to write him a statement of the health of young Las Casas. I replied that I was going to see him in company with Mr. Baxter. His Excellency observed that he would go and have some conversations with Count Bertrand on the subjects complained of. On my return, met Sir Hudson Lowe, who appeared in a very bad humor, and said that Count Bertrand had for a short time spoken very reasonably, but that afterwards he had broken out foolishly about notre situation, or situation, just as if it were of any consequence to England or to Europe what became of Count Bertrand, or as if it were not Bonaparte alone who was looked after, that he did not know what business he had to couple his situation with Bonaparte's. Mrs. Balcombe, an eldest daughter, came to see Countess Bertrand. They were desirous of paying a visit to Napoleon and to Countess Montauban, but as their pass specified Count Bertrand's house, and did not mention either of the others, it was not permitted by the orderly officer. Sought Napoleon afterwards. This governor, said he, has been with Bertrand making some proposals, but in such a dark and mysterious manner that one cannot understand what object he has in view. Everything he says is destitute of clearness, and when he reluctantly gives the truth, it is enveloped in quibbles and evasions. He had a long pourparlers conference about Les Causes, which he concluded by asserting that Les Causes was not in prison and never had been so. È un uomo composto d'imbecillità, de bugie e di un poco di scatrezza. He is a man composed of imbecility, of lies, and a little villainy. Can Les Causes go out? Can he see any person, either French or English, besides his jailers? For seeing a surgeon is nothing. Can he send or receive a letter that does not pass open through their hands? I know not really, continued he, what this man calls being in prison. What a fool I was to give myself up to you, continued he. I had a mistaken notion of your national character. I had formed a romantic idea of the English. There entered into it also a portion of pride. I disdained to give myself up to any of those sovereigns whose countries I had conquered and whose capitals I had entered in triumph, and I determined to confide in you, whom I had never vanquished. Doctor, I won't punish for the good opinion I had of you, and for the confidence which I reposed in you, instead of giving myself up to my father-in-law or to the Emperor Alexander, either of whom would have treated me with the greatest respect. I observed that it was possible that Alexander might have sent him to Siberia. Not at all, replied Napoleon. Setting aside other motives, Alexander would, through policy and from the desire which he has to make himself popular, have treated me like a king, and I should have had palaces at command. Besides, Alexander is a generous man, and would have taken pleasure in treating me well. And my father-in-law, though he is an imbecile, is still a religious man and incapable of committing crimes or such acts of cruelty as are practiced here. Les Causes and Son, along with Mr. Baxter, wrote a letter afterwards to Sir Hudson Lowe respecting the state of health of young Les Causes, and concluded by recommending him to be removed to Europe for the recovery of his health. Mr. Baxter also wrote one of a similar tendency, and one about the Count himself, in which he said that in consequence of his being afflicted with dyspepsia, it was probable that a change to a colder climate would be beneficial, and that of Europe would be preferable.